let's give it up for the leader of this party and the guy that's going to turn this province around.
Well, I have to say, just to get started, you Miramicheers know how to do things here. Like, it doesn't matter when I come, what's going on, there's a packed house. You folks are getting it done right here. It's great stuff. You know, of course, been traveling this province a lot over the last several years. You know, getting the message out, you know, seeing that it's resonating with people. And what I'm convinced of more than I've ever been convinced before, a couple things. First of all, I think people are generally satisfied with how the legislature is operating. Is that a fair statement? Generally. I think second to that, people are becoming more convinced that the same old ways of doing things, the same old two-party thinking is starting to crumble, and people are looking for a new perspective, a new approach. Is that fair to say? So, you know, I'm optimistic. I'm convinced, you know, we're fortunate enough to have 3 seats in the House, and I can tell you, when you look at the data from the last election, there were some really close seats, right, Art? You know, and listen, I feel the pain. I lost the previous election in my riding by 25 votes, so I got you beat by what, 9, 10 votes? Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I'll tell you what, it's an amazing base to build on. Make no mistake about that. It's only you know, an opportunity to grow and to get more support and show people that we're serious about what we're doing. Now, as Michelle was saying, but before I get started, a couple things I do want to say. First, I want to thank Frank and the local groups here for the work that they put in this. I know the amount of effort that goes into it, getting flyers out, getting the word out, putting signs up, Facebook, you know, making sure people are aware. So hats off to you and your team, Frank, all of you folks that work so hard to get this done. Andre, you're awesome. You're awesome. Driving all the way from Grand Falls to be here tonight to give the perspective firsthand from paramedics and what they face, you know, is great to see. And, you know, when it comes to the paramedics, the reason why we're so passionate about that topic, I mean, we've got many topics that we talk about, but you think about what a paramedic does on a daily basis. You know, at our worst times, that's when they're there. And they're there to do their job. They're, excuse me, always professional about how they conduct themselves. So very fortunate to have the paramedics that we have. And I always thought to myself, you know, right off the bat, paramedics have a difficult job. I'm sure they see things that are difficult to deal with. On the flip side, there's many occasions where they are the lifeline between life and death. And they deserve respect. They deserve, you know, to be treated fairly by those they work for, the people, the government. And I've always been a firm believer that their job is hard enough as it is. Why should government make it more difficult? Right? Government should be reducing barriers, getting rid of these ridiculous policies that hinder these folks from making a reasonable wage and from being able to do their job in an effective way that they're appreciated and they enjoy going to work. But that's not happening today in the paramedic field. Matter of fact, that's not happening in a lot of government fields. Right? Whether you're talking about nursing home workers, whether you're talking about people that are working in hospitals, it seems across the board that everybody in the civil service is having a real difficult time simply doing what they originally used to love to do. So we've got to change the thinking here. We've got to reduce the barriers, reduce the policies that get in the way of effective service so people can do their job and it benefits the public as a whole. So thank you, Andre, for being here and sharing. So, as you can imagine, over the last year has been an absolute whirlwind. When we first got elected, we walked into the House, and I say to people, I say, well, how did you navigate that first few months in the legislature? And I said, well, here's what I need people to understand. If someone is elected by one of the two main parties, when they go into the legislature, they may be a new MLA, but they have a party structure that's been around for over 100 years to help guide them through the minefields of operating in the legislature. We're not just 3 new MLAs, we're a brand new party. So we had no foundation per se within the legislative process to be able to navigate the workings of the legislature. We didn't know when to stand up, when to speak, when not to speak. You got a minute, you go a minute and 5, you're being shut down. It was crazy. You know, and what can you say? I mean, you get up there, and I think I got my wrist slapped a few times. And knowing me, I'll get my wrist slapped a few more times before I'm done, because I just like to this is what it is. Let's not sugarcoat it. Here's what I think, and like it, love it, or leave it. But that's what it is. So we're learning, and we've learned a lot over the last year. Like Michelle said, a lot of the things that we're doing, of course, we're doing for our local ridings, things that you wouldn't see on a provincial level. I've had people in my riding say, you know, there's more getting done now than they've seen done in years. And I'm hearing the same from these MLAs too, because, you know, again, I think it was the Premier that said early on, I don't want to misquote him, but I think Steve Murphy was asking him after the election. He said, well, you know, how are you going to work with the People's Alliance? And he said, well, we're going to dance with the one that brought us to the dance. Right? It only makes sense. So like Michelle said, we're working with them as best as we can. We don't agree on everything, obviously, but it's all about pressure too. It's about knowing when to put pressure on, and it's strategy. It's how do you put pressure on? How do you make sure that you're not, you know, being over the top, because you want to get things done, you want to cooperate, you want the betterment of the province. So, you know, in many ways, they've been good to work with, but again, if you've noticed in the last week, we had to put some pressure on, right? And I'm just curious, and we're going to talk about different things tonight. How many had the pleasure of reading the annual report of the Office of the Official Language Commissioner?
Take your blood pressure.
All right. You want me to read it to you? It's only, what? Oh, it's only about 70 pages. So, and again, I want to be upfront. I'm committed to working with anybody that wants to make the province better. I don't care if you're French, English, urban, rural. I don't care what your background is. It doesn't matter. This is about how do we reduce barriers to make things work on the ground. And here's the issue that I had with the report as it came out. It talked about things that are in this utopia world. And it has nothing to do with the reality on the ground. And I asked the commissioner himself, I said, Mr. Commissioner, you state in your report that there were 20 language complaints to Ambulance New Brunswick. That's 20 complaints over 10 years. Okay? 20 complaints over 10 years with over 1 million calls of service. And he puts it in the report. I said, Mr. Commissioner, I get more calls about ditching potholes and brush on the side of the road in a week than what you're getting in 10 years. It's laughable. So I said, you know, these types of things does not promote harmony. This is not bringing our cultures together. Every time that office opens their mouth, you can see the tension and the division rise. And then they turn around and blame us for causing the division. So we're not causing the division. We simply want a practical approach to how language and bilingualism is implemented in the province. That's all we're saying. Make it work. Make it work in a way that is feasible. Make it work in a way that makes sense. And we, again, would fight as hard for the francophone and francophone areas of the province as much as we would for anglophones and anglophone areas of the province. Because that's what representation is about. So I felt we had no choice, and I was ready to run the gauntlet on it, that if the recommendations of this report is implemented, make no mistake about it, we are not going to support the government in the throne speech, and we will not support the government in the budget. We are more than willing to go to an election if indeed they implement these recommendations. Guess what? So far, It's worked, right? So I had some of the opposition parties say, oh, well, they only got 3 seats. You know, they can't bring down the government. Watch us. Just try us. So, you know, our role, I feel our role in the legislature is to make sure that we can pull back on government when we see them going in a wrong direction that is counterproductive to the social unity of this province, to bringing people together and lessening division. We also feel like our role is to push the government. You know, I've told many times to, I said, be bold. You know, if you have to take some risk, take some risk. This is not the time to play it safe. New Brunswick has a massive debt load. We have a private sector which is completely almost non-existent. We have unemployment that is through the roof compared with the rest of the country. We have folks working in nursing homes that are at their wits' end. We've got paramedics that are at their wits' ends. We've got taxation to the eyeballs. We've got language tension. The list goes on and on. Now is not the time to go with status quo. Now is not the time to play it safe. Now is the time to make bold moves, look at the data, look at the facts, figure it out, and move forward with a decision. And that's what we're pushing the government on many files. We're continuing to push on double taxation, and I'm pleased to say that we have had some more rigorous discussion around the double tax. And I said we have to get our system to a place that represents the rest of the country. We are the only province, with the exception of PEI, that has the tax system the way that we do, which is why the private sector won't come here. And I know some of you say, well, why do we need the private sector? All this talk about the private sector. How does that benefit my life? Well, think about it. If you have a strong private sector, it means you have jobs that are not paid for by taxpayers, right? And don't get me wrong, taxpayers have to have jobs. We have to have nurses. We have to have DTI workers to fix the roads. We have to have paramedics. I mean, obviously, there's services government has to provide, and that should be robust, and that should be a healthy way to keep the government service going for the public. But when it comes to the private sector, that's where the real money is, because when the taxes come in from the private sector, those taxes enhance public service. So even if you say, well, I'm not in the workforce anymore, maybe I'm retired, or I've got a job, so why do I care about the private sector? This is about bringing our people home and having them work here. Let me ask you a question, all you folks that are here tonight. How many of you, either directly or indirectly, know of someone that lives in New Brunswick but's not working in New Brunswick, that's flying out in a plane going somewhere else on a regular basis? Almost unanimous in this place. It doesn't matter where I go, I can ask the same question, I will get the same response. That is what you call a private sector lack of growth in this province. We need to reinvigorate the private sector. Our strong stance is you reinvigorate the private sector when you cut through unnecessary regulations and you change the tax structure. Businesses will not thrive and grow in New Brunswick when they're paying more taxes than anywhere else in the province. Why would they? They'll go to Nova Scotia, they'll go to Ontario, they'll go to the States, they'll go anywhere. Why would they come here when they're being double taxed and when they're unduly taxed for conducting business? So we have to change that thinking. Now, I am convinced that the current government is along the same path. They want the same thing. But what I continue to tell the government is don't be timid about it. You have to do it. Stop studying it. We don't need more consultations. We don't need more reviews. We need to make decisions and let's get it done. So I'm pleased to say that we are making some progress, I think, on that file to get government to move on it and to see that we have a different tax structure for municipalities and for the province as a whole. Now, any of you get rid of your front license plates yet? No, some. So, as you know, that was the first bill we presented. Hey, we're 1 for 1. Pass one bill, present one bill, get one bill passed. So that's good. Changes to the Motor Vehicle Act to save you time and money in terms of inspections and whatnot. We're still working on registrations. We're collecting data. You know, being on the outside of the legislature and looking in and trying to figure out, how does government work? How is money collected? Where is it dispersed? How do we figure all this stuff out? So we get in there, we get a research team around us, we start digging into the numbers, and I think to myself, why do they have to make things so convoluted? Right? I mean, you go into Service New Brunswick, you register your vehicle. You do it every year, right? Why? I don't know. And I've asked that question, well, why do we do this? Well, it's just revenue. Well, then why don't we just charge everybody $100 a year and call it a day, right? I mean, anyway, get on my rant. So it makes no sense, right? So we looked into the numbers. Well, how much revenue is that bringing in? Where is that revenue going? And how can we find ways to make this work? We're starting for the first time in over a decade with a minority government. We actually have a surplus in the books. A surplus. It's not a big surplus, but it's getting us out of the red. So I said, we're gaining surpluses, we're starting to get more money in the black rather than in the red. We have to take a portion of that and reinvest it into people. If you keep money in people's pockets, that's money they are going to spend on the economy. Whatever they're buying, whether it's something they need or something they want, they're spending it. When you spend that money, guess what? Taxed, which means a portion of that is coming back into the government. So we're continuing to work on vehicle registrations, and I get the impression from government they feel it's too much lost revenue, so they're not willing to go with a one-time registration. But I said, look, this is about compromise. We're in a minority position. Let's go with once every 2 years, once every 3 years. Let's do something so people can save time and money. And that's what compromise is about. So we're still working on that, hopeful that government is able to hear our demands and work with that to, again, give you a little more time and money and how you go about with your day-to-day life and vehicle registrations. Trying to think here of some other issues. There's many things that we've talked about. Spraying, okay, is another one. We've had many meetings with Rod Cumberland. You all know Rod Cumberland? Yeah, some of you. Rod is a deer biologist. He worked for the province for many years. He's an advocate for stop spraying the forest. And Rod recently was, I'm sure you may have heard on social media, was terminated. He was a professor. I don't know if that's the right word for what he does, but what's that? Instructor at the Maritime Forestry. So all reports that I heard, he was a great teacher. He did his job. He showed both sides of the equation, which is what you're supposed to do in colleges. You don't get that much anymore, eh? It seems now it's all one-sided. It's just here's what it is, and if you disagree, well, God forbid, you disagree with a certain a way of thinking. But Rod always presented both sides. As a result of his stance on certain issues, spraying specifically, I believe, he was terminated. So we put out press releases to say it was not right. There is some process being done there to look at other options in terms of his termination. But regardless, we've had meetings with Rod, and we're continuing to work on the spraying issue. And last that we understand, the department, the minister, made a statement that they are reducing spraying on NB power lines by 30%. So it's a start. It's not everything we want. It's a start. And again, I applaud the minister for that. At least, they're doing something, getting something done there. And I determined, I've said this here before, but I determined early on, we have a choice. There's 3 of us out of 49 seats. There's only 3 of us. And we have a choice. We can either sit with the Liberals and Greens and do nothing, but bark about the decisions of government, or we can grab a seat at the table of government and have input and have some sway in the decisions of government. Which would you choose? Right? And really, it's about results. What results are we getting? What results are we getting for the local riding? What results are we getting on a provincial level? And again, I'm big on that, and I push the government on that. We need to see results. We need to see things happen so that we can move forward as a province and get things done. I can tell you, in my honest opinion, one of the biggest issues is going to be healthcare. I think it is healthcare. I don't know how the Miramichi Hospital is doing. I don't know what the average wait times are here. I know
9 hours.
9 hours. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. I know at the DEC in my area, the Dr. Everett Chalmers Hospital in Fredericton, people same thing. They're going in, they're waiting 7, 8, 9 hours to see a doctor. This isn't working. This is not working. So we've had meetings with the Minister of Health on many occasions to find solutions. How can we make this work to lower wait times in emergency rooms, to get doctors? And one thing we pledged in our platform, which I'm very proud to say has been stated, is they're going to eliminate billing numbers for doctors. So that's going to open it up, right? Doctors can practice now in the province. We have to give doctors the freedom to practice and encourage new doctors to come in and fill the void. And I think where we're lacking family physicians, nurse practitioners can fill that void on a temporary level, so at least people are able to go see somebody with some medical expertise to help guide them along and get them what they need. So they're all things that we're working on, but I am convinced healthcare is going to be a big issue. It's a big issue now, and into the next election, we got to find solutions for healthcare in this province. And I've stood firm, and we're going to continue to advocate for the merging of the two health authorities. People say to me, they say, if you merge Vitality and Horizon, well, I had some Francophone folks say to me, well, we're going to lose all our French hospitals. I said, you're not going to lose your French hospitals. If your French hospital is in a predominantly French area of the province, it will continue to operate as a French hospital. Matter of fact, the reason we want to merge the two is so you don't have to lose your hospitals. I mean, the Premier himself said, as a former finance minister, remember he talked in CBC, remember that CBC panel we had just a couple years back? We talked about duality. We talked about merging the health authorities, school buses, God forbid putting Francophone and Anglophone kids on one bus, And I remember the Premier, who was in the opposition that day, he said, well, that's common sense. And he said, but when you bring it to a political level, it gets all, it loses all rationale. And I'm thinking, does that still apply today? What's the difference? Right? We're talking $40 to $60 million that we're paying for Vitality and Horizon. Most provinces in this country do well to keep one system afloat, and we are bumbling along and struggling to keep two systems afloat. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. So if we can merge the two health authorities, save some money, allow the local areas to have more autonomy in how they deliver their health services. So if you've got an English hospital, English area, they continue to operate. So, again, offering bilingual service. We're not talking about taking anybody's rights away. And the same goes for Francophone hospitals. It's all about not closing hospitals and saving money on the upper end of administration. So that's the type of thing that we're continuing to fight for. This fall, I'm really excited because the legislature reconvenes November 19th. People say to me, they joke and they say, well, the legislature doesn't sit till November 19th. What do you guys do? I say, take a walk in my shoes for a day. Right? It's non-stop, and it's good. I love it. It's exciting. Gets frustrating at times, of course, and you really have to take a step back and take a deep breath. But nonetheless, we're in this to make change. We didn't break history last year to sit around and go with the status quo. We're not here to just go along for the ride. We want considerable change. We want to see New Brunswick go in the right direction, and we're going to continue to fight for it. So this fall, the House reconvenes November the 19th. We have at least one bill that we're working on to present. I'd love to tell you what it is, but then the Premier would hear it and all the government. Right? Strategy. But no, we've been in discussions on how we can do this. So the bill, we got one bill that we're working on. We've got several motions that we're going to be putting forward. See, when you talk about taxation, we've had people say to us, so why don't you put forth a bill on eliminating the double tax and reforming the tax system? I said, well, you can't put a bill forward on taxation. Only the government can do that. But we can put a motion urging the government to take these steps. So those are things that we're going to be looking at here in the fall to make sure that your voice is heard. And I want to say another thing too. You look back in the fall of last year, I don't know what time is it? How long have I been going on? Is it? So, over the last year, I can't remember where I was going now.
Money bill.
Yes, okay, so we're talking about bills. So we have one bill that we're looking to do. We have several motions that we're gonna implement, put forward. And really it's all about changing the mindset of government, changing the mindset of how things work. And you know, people say, well, are you supporting any green motions? Or are you supporting any liberal motions? I said, if they put forward something that makes sense, if they put forward something that works, why wouldn't we support it? I'm not here to play partisanship. If put something forward that makes sense, I will support it. You put forward a Mickey Mouse motion or a Mickey Mouse bill, then you can go to Disneyland because I'm not supporting it, right? It's got to make sense. So over this fall, November the 19th, we reconvene. We're gonna be pushing some of these motions, some of these bills, to hopefully, you know, turn the hand of government towards some of the issues that we would like to see accomplished in this province. So, great things ahead. I believe it. I believe our support is only growing. It's funny. I got to tell this story. So, coming here, and I've been here. How many times have I been here, Frank? Twice? Like this hall? Twice? 3 times? And 4 times? 4 times? It's my second home, Miramichi, right? So, I'm not good with directions. My wife, you know, she tells me every time, if you got a 50-50 chance, you go the wrong way every time. So I relied on my Google Maps on my phone, my GPS. I just typed in 224, South Napan, Agriculture Center, and guess where I ended up? About 20 minutes of that way. And I'm driving along the road, and there's this gentleman walking alongside the road, and beautiful country, by the way. I'm just admiring the autumn leaves and forgetting the time, and oh my goodness, I got a meeting. And this gentleman's walking along the road, and I put my window, and I said, excuse me, sir, and he looked out and kind of nonchalant, and he seemed like, hey, you're doing a great job. I said to him, we're doing a great job because we got a great team and we got the support of the people behind us to get the job done. So I said, thank you for that. Anyway, he gave me directions. A lot better than Google Maps did. It got me where I needed to go. But yeah, we're hearing it everywhere. We know that people are hungry for a different approach. I believe people want an approach that applies some common sense and practicalities on the ground. Again, this is what it gets back to. You know, we talked about paramedics, and I know we've talked a lot about paramedics, but at any given moment, right now as we're speaking, on average, 40% of paramedics or ambulances on the road do not meet the requirements of language services that is expected by the Commissioner's office. 40%. So the question I raised, if we're not meeting the requirements right now at 40%, we have 2 options. We either get more bilingual paramedics, and I think Andre could attest to this, they're not falling from the sky, right? We can continue to import them from Quebec. I don't want to see that. I want to see our people working. So, okay, we're falling short here. So you got to either lower the requirements to a reasonable level. I'm sure when a paramedic shows up on the scene, the patient doesn't care about where you went moose hunting, right? You're sitting there on the side of the road, banged up in a car wreck. You could care less where they went to vacation last year. You want to communicate with the paramedic on medical terms. Broken foot, you know, malade, and you know, simple stuff. So you've either got to bring some rational reasonableness to how we communicate, how paramedics are required to communicate, or you got to change the laws to fit the practicalities on the ground. And this is the point I made to the Commissioner. I said, Mr. Commissioner, as it is right now, according to the Official Languages Act, the province is breaking the laws of the Official Languages Act every single minute of every single day. So you either got to change the act, or the province is going to continue to break the law. If I break the law, I know what happens. Right? There's consequences. Right? So we have to, it's got to meet the practicalities on the ground. This isn't about taking anybody's rights away. It's not about removing anybody's culture. I believe what makes us great in this province is a diversity of culture. And look, I know you guys have heard this and you're sick of me saying it. I grew up in Minto, the metropolis. Yeah, we got one Minto girl here.
Your wife.
Yeah, but so, no, she's not, for the record. But a good friend. So Minto is, I say to people all the time, you know, you get these government people in these offices in Fredericton, they're sitting around in suits and ties trying to figure out all the data and the stats on culture and how to, you know, engineer it in such a way that everybody's protected and everybody's happy and all that stuff. I said, you know what you guys need to do? Take your tie off and come down to Minto for about a week. I grew up in an area that was part of the coal mines. We had Dutch, we had Italian, we had French, we had English, we had German, we had every nationality you could think of. They came to Minto, the Grand Lake area, to work in the mines. And as you can imagine, the working in the mines was no cakewalk, right? It was dangerous, it was dirty, it was tough, and there were many tragedies that happened in the Minto Grand Lake area because of the mining. And I can tell you something, when a miner was trapped in the mine and was having a hard time finding his way out, the folks on the ground didn't say, well, is he English? Is he French? Is he Italian? Is he German? Right? They joined together and they risked their own lives on many occasions to go down and get them out of those mines. And I'll tell you what, at the end of the day on Friday night, when they were done mining for the week, they partied like there was no tomorrow. Right? Washboards, spoons, I say moonshine, but whatever they drank, I don't know, before my time. But just, you know, and they did. And you know, it's a picture of multiculturalism without government intervention, right? It happens. So these are the types of things we're fighting for. And again, you know, whether you're a unilingual paramedic in a predominantly unilingual francophone in a predominantly French area of the province, I'm going to fight for you. You deserve to work. You deserve to do your job. Whether you're French, English, it doesn't matter what you do in this province. If you're working in the community, the language of the community, it only makes sense that you should be able to get your job and do your job as expected. So ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got for you tonight. As you might have noticed, we've been spreading the cold around the office here a little bit. And apologize for you folks that shook your hand. I should have gave you a heads up beforehand, but I sanitized well before I come in. But I really appreciate you Miramichi folks. I really do. I'm serious. Come here. You folks are passionate. You fight for what you believe in. And one thing I've said, you want to pick a fight, pick any other place, but don't pick the Miramichi. They'll kick your butt. So keep up the good work, ladies and gentlemen, in that fight for a better New Brunswick. And Michelle is rocking it up here. I hear her name. I hear her name in places I didn't know around the Miramichi. Because she's doing a good job. Rick's working hard. He does a great job. Rick could tell you stories anyway, but I'll let him do that at some other time. But I'm just excited. I'm excited about where we're at. I'm excited about where we're going to go. And you folks are going to make it happen. It's not us. It's you. It's the people that we want to represent and bring about change in this province. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your support.